So my name is Jerry, and the story I'm about to tell you still gives me chills to this day. And how if things had gone slightly differently, would we be here today? So, my wife Amy and I love to hike, and I'm somewhat of an amateur photographer. So, at least twice a year we try to get away, usually somewhere picturesque, so I can get some great snaps and we can do a little hiking. One summer, we decided to go to Acadia National Park, as it seemed like it had everything we were after. It turns out, it also had something we were not. We arrived at the park, drove to a nice spot next to the lake where we decided we would spend the next couple of nights, and use it as a base camp and go on hikes to check out the scenery. We set up camp and enjoyed a meal cooked over the fire before retiring into our tents for some shut-eye. Waking up the next morning, I noticed that the tent zipper was left slightly open, and my camera was sitting on top of the soft case it usually sits in. I glanced at Amy in disbelief, as if to say, "Come on." She said, "What is it?" I said, "Not only did you leave the zipper on the tent open and let all the bugs in, you left my camera out as well," as it wasn't unusual for my wife to take a few snaps herself. Amy quickly replied with, "It wasn't me." I just gave her that look of, "Oh yeah, sure you didn't." "What? I didn't," she replied. Not thinking much of it, as Amy's quick reaction had me second-guessing whether it was me who had left the camera out and the zip open. We decided to have a quick breakfast and set out on our day's hike. Upon returning from our hike, we were fairly tired, so we decided to get the campfire going and began cooking dinner. We put most of our stuff in our car, as we decided we would get up early to move further into the national park the next day to explore other areas. It eventually got dark. Amy and I were settling in around the fire when we noticed on the other side of the lake that another fire had been started. Not really out of the ordinary, as hikers venture through these places all the time. After a while, we both noticed that there only seemed to be one person around the fire, and it seemed like they were chatting to themselves. I looked at Amy and said, "That's a bit weird," which she replied with, "They were probably talking to someone just out of the light of the fire." Agreeing with her, we carried on with our conversation. Not long after that, the person began becoming more erratic, shouting and screaming. Now our focus is completely on the person on the other side of the lake. They began throwing things, running back and forth, almost as if they were having an argument with themselves. Then, all of a sudden, the erratic behavior just stopped, and the person turned their head and just glared straight across the lake in our direction. I said to Amy, "Are they looking at us?" As soon as the words were out of my mouth, the person began running toward the lake and straight into the water. At this stage, we're completely freaked out, and they began swimming toward us. At one point, we could no longer see as they were out of the light of the fire, but we could hear them thrashing through the water toward us. I yelled out in a panicked voice, "Hey, what do you want?" Not really knowing what else to say. I told Amy to get in the car now. She didn't ask questions, she just turned and ran. The splashing and thrashing of the water got louder until I could see them in the water because of the light from our fire. They eventually made it to the bank and stood up. He slowly glanced up at me. It was a medium-built man with long hair and tattered clothes with an empty expression on his face, staring straight at me, dripping wet. I said once again with a crackle in my voice, "What do you want?" He glared back at me, smiled, and started running at me. I turned toward the car and I ran the fastest I had ever run in my life. Thank God my wife had the forethought to leave the driver's side door open. I jumped in and closed the door just as he reached for the handle. I locked the doors. He began banging on the windows and the doors. He jumped on the roof and started pounding on it, jumping up and down, and then he slid down the front windscreen, turning on all fours to face us, and peering in the window at us as he smashed his fists on the bonnet. At this point, I had had enough. I turned the ignition on, planted my foot to the floor, and made a sharp right turn. The guy instantly fell off the bonnet, and I sped off down the dirt track. I looked in the review mirror to see the man get up to his feet and chase us for a while before giving up. We drove straight home without stopping, leaving our tents and most of our things behind, except for our clothes and my camera, which we had packed in the car in anticipation for a move the next day. My wife rang the police on our way home. They said they would send a unit out there to investigate, but we never heard back from them. If all that wasn't creepy enough, a couple weeks ago after we got home, I was looking through the pictures I had taken on our trip, and there were photos of both my wife and I asleep in our tent. I can only assume it was our psychopath.